If you want to know how to have a healthy relationship, then this video is for you. And in this story, I'm going to tell you about a couple that almost broke up over an $80 parking ticket. And for those of you watching, if you're in a romantic relationship, this is almost definitely going to apply to you, especially if you know that you have some small, stupid fights that tend to turn into big ones. But even if you're not in a romantic relationship, this concept applies to any relationship, but especially the most challenging and triggering ones, which tend to be the people we love most, our romantic relationships and our family. And by taking away this concept, I'm going to teach you one simple change that you can make that's going to help you to be a better partner in any relationship that you have. Because a relationship takes at least two. And I'm going to share with you some of the science in why these small fights are turning into big ones. And as a result, help you to have better relationships. Here we go. This couple was sitting outside a storefront, waiting for it to open. And they parked just down the street. And the man in the relationship, we'll call him James, sees a parking bylaw officer. And they're moving down the street towards the car. And for a moment, he panics because he parked in a spot where there was nobody else. Have you ever been in a busy city and you see what looks like a ton of great parking, but there's nobody else there, and you wonder, is there something wrong here? Am I gonna get a ticket? Is there a sign that I'm misreading? And so he panics and he curses out loud, and his partner got really spooked. After that happened, he quickly realized it was not a parking bylaw officer. In fact, it was just a construction worker wearing a bright vest walking by the car. So to be clear, there was no parking ticket, but the damage had already been done, or at least was about to. What started out as a small fight, she got spooked, he overreacted. She then overreacted because he told her she overreacted. And have you ever told someone to calm down or that they're overreacting when they're upset? Yeah, didn't go so well. So this couple was headed for trouble. And 6 hours later, this couple was still fighting about this incident. And it had become about all the ways that this other partner had always overreacted. It was always a problem. It was never rational. And the male partner, James, was furious and yada, yada, yada. It escalated to the point where they were almost ready to break up over it. So what happened here? Well, there's a few things that happen on the physiological level. But before I get there, I want to talk about three main problems with small fights turning into big ones. The first thing is the damage caused in the moment is significantly greater. When we experience these negative emotions, they get locked in our brain, and our memory works really well based on emotion. And so these negative experiences get stored. Instead of having just a little negative slight against a relationship, we've now got a big challenge or stressor to deal with. So by turning a small fight into a bigger one, we just have a bigger stressor to deal with in the relationship, and that takes work. The second thing that happens is if we don't have a really good system for dealing with that kind of stress, the stress sits there, and over time, a relationship starts to feel like an overwhelming amount of work because we've got all this built up stress that we haven't dealt with, and some part of us knows that at any minute, a small stress could turn into a really big one. So that's two problems. Now, the third problem is what happens next. If we keep having small fights turn into big ones, and we keep not knowing how to handle that stress, and so we're now anticipating it, some part of us is worried that we're gonna experience that, not knowing how to interact with our partners as comfortably, then the third thing that happens is we can go one of two ways. Either we shut down and we stop engaging with the relationship so as much, we feel overwhelmed, and we stop really fully showing up, and we start to create distance in our relationship. Or we take the other path and we get anger, the relationship fights escalate more quickly. There's more fury and hatred and anger, and you start saying things you don't mean, and it gets worse. Neither of these is good for a relationship. And if you've been in a relationship for any amount of time, you've probably experienced some flavor of this. So why is it happening? Well, there's three physiological phenomena that we can look to help understand why this is happening, because despite what you may think of your partner or despite what they may think of you, you're not crazy. The three things that are happening are: one, emotional hijacking; two, the negativity bias; and three, something called the mood congruency effect. Number one, emotional hijacking. Basically, what happens is when our stress level hits a certain threshold, we lose the ability to empathize with others. Empathy, that thing that helps us sense other people's feelings, well, it turns out it's really important for communication. It helps us to pick up nonverbal cues from our partner, and it's really needed to communicate well. And so what ends up happening is that part of our brain shuts down. We lose the ability to empathize, and we also lose the ability to think logically and rationally. Specifically, what tends to happen is the outer structures of our brain that are associated with things like planning ahead, considering and weighing multiple options, other executive functions, those things start to fall to the wayside. And the other thing that happens is the part of our physiology, our mirror neurons that respond to the body cues of our partner subconsciously, that means without us even thinking about it, those get impaired as well. Really what actually happens is a little bit more complicated, but I'm not going to go into that here. And so essentially what happens is we lose the ability to communicate well, and we lose the ability to think rationally or plan ahead. And so when we get into this discussion, it starts to become really difficult to regulate our behavior and to understand the other person and to even make sense. And so what happens is we get the argument effect. You're talking to them, you make some point, and then they must not be hearing you because the way that they respond feels like they are crazy or they're not listening to you. And so then it escalates and it feels like you are making perfect logical sense. They are not understanding at all what the heck's going on. Well, this is an example of emotional hijacking, and likely what's happening is, one, you're actually not making as much sense as you think you are. Two, even if you are, the rational part of their brain is turned off. And three, the parts of each of your brains that are responsible for communicating, the empathy circuitry, are offline. So communication sucks all around and you're headed for trouble. So that's an easy way to make things worse in the moment and turn a small fight into a big one. But it gets worse. Two more things that I'm gonna talk about that create a problem here. The second thing is the negativity bias. Now, each of us is hardwired biologically to have a preference for remembering negative events that are stressful, that are scary. And when I say preference, I don't mean because you decided, you know what? Yeah, I want to remember all the worst things that happened in a relationship and none of the good ones. No, that's how our biology is wired, because tens of thousands of years ago, or maybe more, I'm not an evolution expert, our ancestors who were able to remember dangerous things were able to avoid them, were able to survive. Think seeing a poisonous snake. The people who were able to recognize and remember the colors of a poisonous snake were better able to avoid it and make sure they didn't lose more friends to those poisonous snakes. And so for that reason, whenever we have a fight in a relationship, it is going to be easier for us to remember that fight. And so I'll give you a personal example. My girlfriend and I had a challenging day the other day. It felt like we were fighting all day. But then at the end of the day, when we went over it, after we had resolved the fight, and we looked back, we realized that actually 90% of the day or more we spent laughing and having fun. We had an amazing adventure out to the park. Lots of really great things had happened, and most of the day we spent happy. But the 10% that we spent fighting was more than usual, and that is where our focus was naturally drawn to. So in practice, what we need to look out for is that it can feel like things are going a lot worse than they are, because our biology is hardwired to remember the scary and negative things a lot easier. Thirdly, we have one final challenge stacked up against us. And when you couple this with our rational brain being turned off, our ability to empathize and communicate being severely impaired, and the fact that we tend to remember a lot of negative things easily, it's a real doozy. This third thing is called the mood congruency effect. And basically what happens is, when we have a mood, we are more easily able to remember other events that correspond and justify that mood. As an example, when you're feeling happy, your brain is more easily able to recall memories from times that you were happy. So basically what this mood congruency effect is saying is, whatever mood you're feeling, it becomes easier for your brain to recall memories where you're experiencing a similar mood. This is an oversimplification, but for this case, it works well enough. And so essentially what happens is, also when we're sad, we tend to more easily remember times when we're sad. Have you ever felt doom and gloom? You got some bad news, you're feeling sorry for yourself, and all of a sudden you're flooded with memories of all the ways that you screwed up in life and all the times when you're at your absolute lowest. Or on the flip side, you finish a hard workout, you're feeling like $1 million, and you're remembering all the times that you succeeded in job interviews, all the positive interactions you've had with people, all the people who like you and how great your friends are and your life is. In that way, Dr. Benjamin Hardy says that all behavior is addictive. That is, it creates more of itself through, in part, this mood congruency effect. And so if you put that together and plug it into the situation with the parking ticket, they're already fighting, the couple's already angry and stressed out. What are they gonna remember? They're gonna remember all the times their partner stressed them out, made them angry, pissed them off. And if they were thinking rationally, they might be able to shut that down. But unfortunately, because of emotional hijacking, that process is largely shut off. And if they're able to empathize and feel that, wow, their partner's just really stressed, it's not that they hate them, it's not that they're a bad person, they're just really struggling to deal with a stressful situation, we might be able to handle it better. But our empathy turned off. And if our brains were hardwired and built for being happy and positive all the time, we might not have that many negative memories to recall because we'd be so focused on all the positive. But because of the negativity bias, that's not really the case. And so you put all those things together, we've got tons of ammo for making things way, way, way worse, and we have none of the defenses for stopping ourselves from doing that. So what do we do? Well, luckily I've got a solution for you. Now, this is not the perfect solution, and I told you it's simple. That doesn't mean it's easy, but I will say, this is one of the simplest ways to help yourself improve your relationship that I've ever come across. And luckily for you, there's gonna be room to improve at this through potentially your whole life. So if you like growing and you like improvement, good luck. I have found one incredibly important decision that if you can make this decision once and never make it again, you are going to save so many small fights turning into big ones. And the decision is deciding that we as a couple are only going to fight about what is happening right now. We are never going to bring in anything from the past outside of this very moment. And going a step further here, because you can't really control your partner. Ideally, you and your partner decide on that together. But if you're not there yet, you can at least make a decision for yourself that you are not going to bring up things from the past during a current fight, and that if your partner brings up something from the past in a current fight, you're not going to respond to it. You're not going to react to it, and you're not going to allow it to get to you. So, making that decision is not the same thing as never letting those things bother you or never bring up things from the past. But making the decision means that that's a commitment you're making and you're being intentional. And so whenever you slip up or you make a mistake, this is the place that you come back to. I will not fight about things that are not happening right now. Okay, how do you actually do that? One simple practice that I found to be extremely helpful is having a relationship meeting once per week. During this meeting, there's a couple things that we discuss. One, we share the things that we want to celebrate our partner for. What are all the things, or what are 3 of the things that really made your life better that your partner did? Was it just their presence, their warm energy? Did they cook some meals for you? Was it some nice touch they gave you, a massage? Not only does this help elevate the relationship by creating more positive emotions to remember, we gotta fight against that negativity bias, but it also helps you learn over time, what are the things that my partner actually really loves that I do? Because I promise you, there's a lot of things that you think are making a big difference in your relationship, but are not. And this has to do with the love languages and how people like to receive love. And so the second thing that we bring up in these relationship meetings is what do we want to be recognized for? And so this helps again bridge the gap, because what we found is not just in our relationship, but in a lot of the relationships with my clients as well, there's almost always things that one partner is doing for the other that they feel the other partner is not acknowledging or taking for granted. And this creates negative emotions, and it creates a rift, and it adds up, and it's easily addressed. Because if you can start to bring up the things that you're putting effort into that you want to be acknowledged for, then your partner has an opportunity to actually recognize that you're doing them, acknowledge you for the effort, and maybe they realize that, actually, yeah, that's really helpful. I totally didn't even notice that you're making me breakfast every morning, but it actually made a huge difference in my life. Thank you for doing that. Or you might realize, honestly, I'm pretty fine to make my own breakfast. If you enjoy doing it, that's great, but I would totally rather you put that 10 to 15 minutes into something else, like a massage. That's what I would really love. And so with just these first 2 prompts here, 3 things that you want to appreciate your partner for and 2 things that you want to appreciate yourself for, you're totally improving the communication and getting a better sense of how each other wants to be valued and what's actually valuable in the relationship. Third thing, this is maybe the most important, is one thing that triggered you that you want to work on this week, that you're asking your partner to change or do differently. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. One, it allows a space, an untriggered space, to discuss, not fight about, discuss something that was triggering. And it's even more impactful if you can bring it up as your problem, not theirs. Because generally speaking, it's your reaction to their behavior that's a problem. You're getting upset by what they're doing. Now, I'm not trying to justify their behavior or excuse it. And so if that seems hard to conceptualize right now, you can just leave that part out of it. But the important thing is, this is one thing to discuss. And the reason it's one thing is because if you start asking your partner all the time, you gotta change this, you gotta change this, you gotta change this, they're likely gonna start to feel that you don't accept them. And truthfully, you probably aren't accepting them. And additionally, that is a really big load of work. One thing is manageable. And to actually create a lasting, sustainable change, it's gotta be simple. No matter how amazing your partner is, they are a human being, they've got a lot of stuff going on in their life likely, and many things to think about, and giving them a laundry list of things to change is likely gonna feel overwhelming, judgmental, unaccepting. And so this gives you an opportunity as the partner to work on accepting. There's going to be some things that they do that you don't like that you're just gonna have to learn to accept. Well, you don't have to learn to accept it, you can also leave. But this then puts the onus on you to prioritize accepting your partner over trying to change them. But it still gives you headway that every single week you're gonna make improvement on one thing. If you do this, your relationship is gonna get better every single week. The other thing that's really great about this is it automatically helps us to filter out the unimportant. When you're in the middle of a fight, everything feels important. That couple fighting about the parking ticket, that $80 parking ticket felt really, really important. It wasn't important. And in hindsight, when we look back at our life and we look at all the little fights, we can see what's really important. And a lot of the little fights we don't even remember. Even though the negativity bias helps us remember these negative things, there's many of them we still just don't even remember. And so by making the relationship meeting once a week, basically it comes to this. If it's not important enough that you are remembering it at the end of the week during the meeting, it's probably not important enough to bring up to your partner and ask them to change. And so every time you ask your partner to change something, you are making a withdrawal from the relationship. You're taking energy from the relationship. Now, are there benefits? Absolutely. And I'm not saying you should never ask your partner to change anything, but every time we're asking them to change something about themselves, we are making an ask. We're taking from the trust of the relationship. And so this just makes sure that when we're gonna do that, we're gonna do it for something that's an investment. Yes, we're asking for a withdrawal, but we're gonna invest that in something that's gonna grow a relationship and make it better. All right, hopefully that helps. And through this system, you're able to better manage your small fights and stop them from turning into big ones. In this video, we looked at 3 different phenomena that make it really easy to turn small fights into big ones. 1, we looked at emotional hijacking. 2, we looked at the negativity bias. And 3, we looked at the mood congruency effect. And those 3 things together are quite the fighting force to help us create big, huge fights out of seemingly nothing. But by having a meeting once a week where we bring up one thing that challenges them with the partner that we want them to change, we can mitigate a lot of these negative side effects. As a result, you can have happier relationships, less stress, and more fun together. All right, if you liked this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to be notified when more videos like this are coming out. And in the comments below, you can get started on this relationship meeting concept right now. Right in the comments, you could put some combination of 3 things you want to appreciate about your partner this week. What did they do that made a difference in your life? How has your partner showed up in a great way this week? 2 things that you want to acknowledge yourself for. What are you doing a good job of? What's the value you're bringing to the relationship or trying to bring to the relationship? And lastly, what's one thing? What's the most important thing that if you could have your partner change would make a big difference in your life? Good luck. Have a great day. Cheers.